Welcome back to Government Cases with John Ray, and today we'll be diving in about the United States versus Nixon case. On June 17, 1972, 5 men broke into the headquarters of the Democratic National Committee for wiretapping and finding any additional information to help Richard Nixon be reelected in the upcoming election. As people became aware of the situation, the Nixon administration denied any wrongdoing, but it was clear they were trying to cover up the intrusion and the stealing of information. Archibald Cox was appointed as Nixon's special prosecutor and started an independent investigation on this matter. On July 1973, it was discovered that Nixon had previously installed a taping system inside the Oval Office and the Cabinet Room. Through these recordings, if Nixon were to say anything about the case, whether if he was involved or not, these recordings can be used against him. Archibald Cox and the Senate issued a subpoena to have the recordings be used as evidence, but Nixon refused to turn over the recordings and claimed it's his executive privilege. Nixon told Cox to drop the subpoena, but refused, and ended up firing him. Some vocab to note is executive privilege, the president's interest of withholding information to the public, and a subpoena is a request for the production of documents or a request to appear in a court or legal proceeding, information that may support the facts at issue in a pending case. As investigations grew, this eventually became known as the Watergate scandal, where 69 people were indicted and 48 people were convicted of aiding, participating, or hiding information, some of whom were part of Nixon's administration. Notable people include John Dean, Harry Barnes Haldeman, John Ehrlichman, Charles Colson, Jed Magruder, and Louis Gray. These individuals who were indicted became known as the Watergate Seven. On April 1974, Leon Jaworski was the new prosecutor of Nixon, replacing Archibald Cox. There, he would file another subpoena, but for only certain tapes. Nixon refused, but was forced due to the pressure that was being placed on him. There, Nixon would give Jaworski some edited tapes. James St. Clair was the lawyer of Nixon who asked Judge John Sirica of the District Court for the District of Columbia to reverse the subpoena. Sirica denied the motion and ordered Nixon to hand over the tapes by May 31st. On July 8, 1974, Nixon and Jaworski took this over to the Supreme Court to decide whether Nixon's usage of executive privilege was absolute. Justice William Rehnquist recused or excused for a judge himself from the case due to his relations with Nixon and the individuals associated with Watergate. Nixon, during his case, argued executive privilege because he has the right to keep conversations confidential between him and his advisors, national security because he feared that sensitive information can be used against him or the country, presidential authority because the president has the power to commence these types of duties, and judicial review because they should not have interfered with issues in the executive and legislative branches. The Supreme Court, seeing the importance of national security, the Supreme Court found it reasonable in the public's best interest to obtain the truth and the tapes containing the information. First, the Supreme Court had to decide whether it was okay for the president to use executive privilege in certain circumstances. On July 24, 1974, the Supreme Court ruled against Nixon, and the executive privilege did not work in this circumstance. Executive privilege was unconstitutional, forcing Nixon to hand over the tapes. The court emphasized that no one, even the president, is above the law, and executive privilege cannot be used to shield information that can be used against them. The Supreme Court still acknowledged executive privilege as a power of the president, but the Supreme Court can step in if it prevented the courts from doing their jobs. The United States versus Nixon case questioned whether the president was above the law if they used the executive privilege to withdraw the releasement of evidence that may be used against them. The Supreme Court decided that no one was above the law. They stated that executive privilege is a qualified privilege and not an absolute privilege. As a result of this controversy and soon impeachment, Nixon became the first president to resign from the presidency. President Gerald Ford, on September 8, 1974, pardoned Richard Nixon. Ford did this because he wanted the nation to heal from the trauma caused by Watergate and did not want the nation to divide after the long legal battle. Ford wanted to show mercy and peace towards Nixon as well. Ford also wanted the focus to shift from Watergate to domestic and international challenges.